Hello everybody, happy hump day and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Sunday Mirror's showbiz editor, Halina Watts, everybody. And we're going to take you through the best stories of the day, and through all of it, we want you to ask us your questions. Get into the comments, ask us whatever's on your mind. We're going to be talking about lockdown and schooling and lottery winners today. Ask us what's on your mind and we'll do our best to answer them for you. So what have we got in the paper today? Well, the Mirror is launching a major fundraising campaign today that's on the front page to help school children during lockdown. And it's been kicked off with a £1 million donation from the National Education Union. Now, the Mirror's teamed up with this union to provide basic items like books and pens and other stationery to the poorest children who are doing their schoolwork at home for the foreseeable future. It's called Help a Child to Learn, and it's going after the youngest children as well. And it will benefit schools in England with the highest proportion of youngsters on free school meals. So these are people whose families are already struggling somewhat, probably in work, probably on benefits and work-related benefits, and who are just really having great problems now. Now, the Daily Mail is going to be furious with us because they launched a campaign earlier this week or last week to get laptops to children. And they're nowhere near £1 million yet, although I'm sure there will be at some point. But Halina, there's a lot of people who are going to say this is mad. We are a wealthy country. It's the 21st century. Our schools are so much better equipped, and so are most homes in this country than those parts of the world we associate with having a lack of things like this. So people are going to say this is going to mean iPad upgrades for spoilt snowflakes. Are they right to say that, or is there a need for this?
I think there really is a need for this. And I know it is shocking. We live in a first world country, don't we? And we look around us, we go to the shops, there's so much around us and there's so much wealth. But actually people are really struggling, and it's really basic things like pens and paper. And children are actually finding themselves using like old bits of scraps of paper, leaflets to write their notes on, and they don't even have like crayons. It's just really basic things. And of course, then on top of that, you've got the laptops, the iPads, the things that all school kids really need at the moment. And it's 1.78 million of children have no access to a laptop. And I think that's really shocking. Yeah. So this is a really, really needed campaign. So it's brilliant that we're doing this.
Right, and so Sarah Jane says, will it actually reach the children themselves or just line the school's pockets that actually have done very little to equip families for learning? Now, Sarah, you've got a point, because schools have not been able to get, paper, pens, paint, laptops, things like that to children when they're learning. In the first lockdown, teachers had a lot of criticism because children were at home, had nothing. For this lockdown, my experience from my daughter's school, they've done loads of work because they had a lot of pressure on them to do it, to produce learning plans and recorded lessons and some live lessons, and to have Google Hangouts and stuff with the children who are at home, and try to encourage as much teaching as possible, which of course is still difficult for parents who are working. You don't have several hours a day. You want your children taught, but you don't have several hours a day to do it. But this is not going to line anyone's pockets, because it's going to create vouchers to buy things like stationery. All right. And the schools, the reason they haven't equipped you with the paint and the pens and everything else is because the government didn't give them the money to do it. Their budgets have been paying and have been raped effectively to pay for things like deep cleaning at the schools, which the government also didn't give them money for. And it's, in this story it says 48% of teachers have paid for things like paint and pens and pencils for their pupils. 48% of teachers have had to go into their own pockets to pay for pens and pencils. Then no one's pockets are being lined here, are they? They're being stripped is what they're being. And there's some fascinating stuff. If you go onto the page 4 and 5 spread that we've got in here, it talks about Zane Powles, who was awarded the MBE. There's a picture of him in the bottom left there. He was awarded the MBE for delivering about 7,500 meals to pupils at home during the last lockdown. And one of the things he says is quite gripping. I think it's worth reading out. People think poverty's in Africa, but wherever you live, it's just round the corner. And we need to think about that, because there are literally children in wherever you live, Sarah Jane, in a village or a town, and where I live and where Halina lives, who not only don't have a laptop, don't have access to broadband, but don't have painting materials, who don't have paper in the house, who are trying to do their lessons on the back of a leaflet. I mean, Halina, is there anything in this stuff which there's lots of stories in here about from teachers and what they've seen of how their pupils are struggling during the pandemic? Is there anything there that caught your eye?
Well, just to talk about that, actually, one of my best friends is called Sarah Jane, similar name to the lady who's asked the question, and she is teaching in Southampton in a school, and she's really struggling. Like, she's finding it really hard. There's so much extra work for the teachers as well, and the fact that, you know, what you've just said about them having to reach into their own pockets, and these teachers are not paid a lot of money. You know, they're on the front line, and they're probably one of the most underpaid professions in the UK, which is just outrageous. So obviously the children are really suffering, but the teachers have so much on and are finding it like double the amount of work than normal, and just finding it really stressful themselves. So I think also we need to bear in mind how it's affecting like everyone in the chain, and ultimately the teachers are going to be able to do a better job by having this campaign supporting them, because their students are going to have the right things to be able to learn.
Exactly. So Rob has said there, he started a campaign 12 days ago to buy laptops for disadvantaged children, but hey, I don't have the backing of £1 million, so you're not interested. We're interested, Rob. We've put you on the screen to all the thousands of people that see this. There's his GoFundMe link. If you want to help Rob's campaign to buy laptops for disadvantaged children, rather than the Daily Mails, perhaps, I don't know, it's up to you, then there's the link, and feel free to help him out a bit. Now, there's a story in one of these as well, but my teacher about a typical day of homeschooling for one of her pupils. And she says, there's 6 children in this house. They share a bedroom. They have no desk to work at and no door on the room. They have no access to paper or a printer, and are using their phones to access the classes virtually. They can't concentrate because there's constant noise from the other children in the house, and they're suffering anxiety and feeling lonely and isolated. There are other stories in here. There's a teacher who's paid for a subscription to a software service so she can convert documents to PDFs so they can edit it at home if they don't have pens and paper. But most kids that are accessing the lessons on their phones, or even in one case here, outside McDonald's to get the free Wi-Fi, can't edit a PDF on their phones. You can't access these things that are needed. And we had a story, didn't we, a little while ago, and Marcus Rashford was talking to Boris Johnson about free school meals, where a Premier League footballer paid insane amounts of money, had to explain to the Prime Minister that children who need free school meals probably didn't have a printer to print the vouchers off on.
That is shocking. Yeah.
How is it that the Prime Minister doesn't know this stuff? I mean, they have given, to be fair to the government, they said they were going to give 1.3 million laptops out. They've given about 700,000. They haven't quite hit that target, and that's nowhere near touching the sides. And as Peter says there, the laptop that are supplied are so old, some don't even have Wi-Fi cards. I'd be amazed if they've even got Windows 95, frankly, Peter, because a lot of them are old laptops have been handed in and converted and all the rest of it. The government has tried, but what's it doing wrong, Halina? What could it do better? Your friend who's a teacher, what would she want to have happen?
I think, you know, this is ultimately a Tory government, isn't it? And they really would love to see everything privatised. They don't really believe so much in the state, although they have had to the past year, haven't they? And I think it's actually, do they actually really want to help, or are they just doing this because they feel they have to? And I feel that they just need to step up. They need to roll it out on a bigger scale. They just need to be completely more committed, and they're not. And that, I think that is symptomatic of what's happened during the whole of this past year. You know, they haven't properly stepped up. It's the same thing that's happened in the pandemic. They came out too late. They're not fully committed. They really need to come out and be more supportive of things like this.
They seem surprised by some of the detail of governing. which is astonishing to me. And Mike says, morning, Mike, why are newspapers providing funds for schools that the government won't? The answer to that, Mike, is because head teachers missed a trick. They cocked up because they should have been offering PPE to the government or ferries instead of education. And then they'd have been given billions without any questions asked. But because they were offering to educate often poor, often perhaps even children of Labour voting parents, they didn't get any cash. So, that's the fault of schools and head teachers for not seeing the way the wind was blowing, isn't it, really? Now, but I want to show you, we're going to move on to the pandemic now, because Boris Johnson came out yesterday and said that he was deeply sorry for every life that's been lost. He didn't say he was deeply sorry for cocking things up, but he was sorry for every life that's been lost. Now, there's one little bit on the top of this spread about the 100,000 dead, the horrible milestone we hit yesterday, right there on the top right on page 9, about Kate Middleton, Duchess of Cambridge, we should call her now, who is going to, she's already got these campaigns to help children who are not early years children who are not having the right access to the right things at early start of their lives, focus on mental health. And she's saying now that she's going to help the silent victims, the children, their families, those who aren't seen and heard as they come out of this. And that's brilliant. But Halina, we're in a situation where an unelected queen-to-be and unelected teachers can see more clearly what needs to be done than the actual elected government, who elected with a landslide not 5 minutes ago. I don't quite know. If Kate was running for office, she'd get elected. Marcus Rashford was running for office, he'd get elected. I think if Boris Johnson went to the polls tomorrow, I hope that he wouldn't, but I'm worried that he would be. What are they do? What have they got to do?
Yeah, no, I know. But I think it says a lot about, our country and what we're voting for, and, the things that people are reading. Obviously a lot of people that are tuning in today are reading the Mirror, which is great, but there are a lot of other forces at work, very right-wing forces that have a lot of agenda, that are trying to push their own agenda. And it is amazing that the royal family are trying to support things that the government should be doing. But I just hope that all of this comes to light, and then in the next election the population does turn against the Tories, and we do have an election change. But like you said, will that happen? I don't know, because there were things that happened before and still the Tories got in. So I just wonder if our country, I feel like our country is can be a bit of a Daily Mail reading country, and I wonder if that will change and people will just open their eyes to other things that are going on, and the poverty and the lack of opportunities for a lot of other people.
It's not all about Brexit. Sometimes it's just about trying to put food on the table. Now, Peter says, little Johnny had Nike trainers, but no laptop. Peter, it might be worth considering the fact that they might not be actual Nike trainers. They might just be rip-offs. They might also be out of a charity shop. They might also be hand-me-downs from previous siblings. And it might also be that a family that was doing perfectly well a few months or years ago and could afford Nike trainers now is on its uppers. Things do change. And it's not just about a laptop, as we've explained there. It's about kids who don't have access to pens and paper at home. I have a fairly nice middle-class lifestyle, let's face it. Got a mural on my wall and everything, like Hilda Ogden. But when my daughter came home from school, I can't give her painting stuff here, because if I did, she's 5 and it'd be up the wall. So there's no paint in the house for a very sensible reason. But she should have access to creative things like painting and glitter and stuff like that I don't want anywhere near my vacuum cleaner. So that's why some schools do need to provide stuff. I bet the parents have smartphones and smoke and drink, says Paul. Right. There's lots of reasons that people smoke and drink, and it's usually not because they've got lots of brilliant, wonderful things going on in their lives. And if a parent has a smartphone, it may well be the only smartphone in the property. And if you've got a couple of children, they can't all use it at the same time to access their lessons, can they, Paul? And as we've said, we're talking here about books, about paints and pencils and paper. Going back to my daughter, I mean, she's doing these, they have her school, these phonics books, very special books about helping you learn about language. I don't have any of them in my house. She's got books, right? But none of these phonics books. And if she's going to access them, she can't access them if she's not at school. And the school can't provide phonics library for every child in the catchment area. So there are other problems. This is not just about giving cash to people that you don't approve of. This is about giving cash to provide things that children actually need. Kirsty said, some people are awful. I don't smoke or drink. My partner works. We still can't afford 5 laptops. Thank you, Kirsty. There you go, lads. That's the story that you're busy trashing. I think we have had a bit of a, I can't quite describe it, but it's not just a Tory or Daily Mail attitude, Halina. We have, at the moment, we seem to be in a country where we don't trust other people. We don't trust them to spend food vouchers, even though they're limited only to groceries. We don't trust them to provide laptops for their children. We don't trust them to do anything. We just assume that the other guy is horrible in some way. And we don't give anybody credit, do we?
No, and I think there's a paranoia which I think has really been cultivated by right-wing media, because they make you believe that, you know, immigrants are bad, that your neighbour is on benefits and she's taking from the state and what is she giving back? But actually, shouldn't we really be clubbing together and just supporting everyone? You know, anyway, England and the United Kingdom, it is a country of immigrants. People come from all over the world and have settled here over generations. And I just think the problem that the country has is, like you said, it is this paranoia and this fear that, oh, we're going to lose out. But actually, if you just focus on yourself and your own life and you don't look around you, I think then you lose out so much. But obviously, if you are struggling, then you can't support. You can't support each other. But I do feel that we need to look out for each other a lot more. And that ultimately will raise our lifestyles and things will be better in the long run.
As Mandy says, the children are suffering the most from this upheaval. My son's mental health's really bad now and he's only 7. Give him a hug from us, man. The situation is that I think it's the same as with the 100,000 dead. We could have done better than this. With pandemic, with education, with being nice to each other. And yesterday, when Boris Johnson came out and said, I'm deeply sorry for all the lives lost, we also had Neil Ferguson, Professor Pantsdown. Some people may remember him, but he's still an advisor to Sage, who said that had we acted earlier, we could have saved maybe even 20,000 or more than that lives. And he's the half of the deaths that we've had so far, 50,000 odd, have been in the last 2 months. There'll be more dead in this winter wave than there were in the first wave because it's lasted longer and it's had higher peaks. Now, Boris Johnson didn't really say sorry for very much yesterday. Issued his condolences sort of thing, as though it was something that was just completely out of his control. But I can remember years ago, all right, I'll tell you a story now. When I was a reporter on the Sunday Mirror, I had to phone his press spokesman, Gutto Harry, one day and say, look, Gutto, we've got a story here about Boris, who was Mayor of London at the time. And that we said, we've got a story. He was riding his bike to work and he went through some traffic lights. He went down one-way streets. He nearly knocked a pedestrian over. He mounted the pavement several times on his bike, blah, blah, blah. And Gitto said, well, look, off the record, Susie, because he's Welsh, right? Or whatever accent you think I'm doing. Off the record, Susie. But I've spoken to Boris about this, and he's really keen on the highway code and cycling safety. He would never do that. It's absolutely not him. I don't think that story's true. And I said, well, Gitto, we had a photographer behind him on a bike, and we've got a video of the whole thing. And Gitto took a pause and said, well, in that case, Boris is very, very sorry. And I just kind of remembered that yesterday when he came out. And he's just, well, you know, I'm absolutely fine. We're doing all we can. Everything's great. Don't worry. We'll all be out of this by Christmas. We'll be fine. There won't be any more lockdowns, blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, in that case, I'm very, very sorry. And Do you think he was sincere? Do you think he looked depressed?
He did look depressed. He looked a bit like Gollum, didn't he? He did not look happy. And is that real? Was he, or did he practice that look and what he was going to say for quite a while and say, oh, I've got to get into the mood and look really sorry, and I am really sorry. But it's just too little, too late, really, isn't it? And I feel like with Boris, he's very good at being a puppet and, just delivering what he has to say. I think he's a good orator and he speaks really well. And I think that's why people supported him. Well, I do. I think people can. They think he goes. But then I do think his bumbling buffoon, it endears him to people, But I don't know why I'm all saying this, because I just think it is all fake. And, he is somebody who's just out for himself. He just wants his, a powerful, rich friends to all be in power and then those people to be supported. And he's shown that he can't really support the working classes and people that really need it. Then this government isn't about that. But he does look really sorry, so I wonder if he is.
Well, do you know what? I'm gonna practice what I preach, and I'm gonna give him some credit, all right? And I'm gonna assume that he's a normal human being somewhere in there. Rita, why are you slagging Boris off? Nothing more than bullying. We're reporting the facts at the moment, Rita, and I'm just currently trying to see things from his point of view. So give us a chance. He's a normal human being somewhere under that big tub of laundry hamper that he seems to walk around in, and he must have this on his conscience somewhere. He knows that he's the person and he said yesterday, I take ultimate responsibility for this, the decisions of the government as we've got to this place, that I'm the Prime Minister and that's on me. And like you said, he's a bit gloom, so he seems to feel it, and he hates giving bad news. The thing is, I don't think he's got the machinery inside him, in his brain, in his character, to actually do what has to be done, to see what other people need, to understand that kids on free school meals don't have printers at home, to understand that feeding children and perhaps bailing out people is more important than bailing out businesses in a pandemic. I don't think he's got it. He might be as well-intentioned as you like, but I don't think he's got what's needed inside him to deal with the detail.
Because he doesn't come from that. He's never experienced that. So how can you understand if you've never, had friends who that's happened to, or you've been around that? He comes from such a privileged background, and so do most of the people leading this government, don't they? They come from really wealthy families, and I don't think he's ever had to struggle too much to feed his kids.
So doesn't have quite the same experience to put into the back of his head to compute what he's thinking about as he goes forward. Now, Michael says, what Boris Johnson could have done to prevent deaths with COVID-19, it's all been rehearsed loads of times, Michael, but the scientists and the doctors and the facts and history are pretty clear that he locked down late 3 times in a row. To lock down late once is a mistake. To lock down late twice is a failure of responsibility on the part of a government that should have learned that lesson by then. To lock down late 3 times is either just massive gross incompetence or it's corporate manslaughter. I don't know which it is. It's insanity or it's actually trying to kill people. And I think, like I've just said, I think mainly it's incompetence. But he could have done all that. And we've got existing problems, as I've written several times. Part of the reason COVID has had such a big effect on this country is because we had existing public health crises with obesity, with poverty, with deprivation, with people living in what are effectively Victorian slums because of their social status. And they were sitting ducks for COVID. If you read Daniel Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year, which is about 1665, Great Plague, if you read anything about the Black Death back in the 14th century, if you read about Spanish flu in 1918, there's a great book called Pandemic, which came out earlier a couple of years ago and is very worth reading. There are so many things which are common. They always killed the poorest. They killed the people with the worst health, and the worst health is because you are poor. You're not reporting facts, you're reporting your views. We're trying to do both, Sam, and this is facts, what's happened in the Spanish flu, what's happened in 1665. You can go and Google all of it and come back and tell us if we're wrong. I don't mind at all. But we are also reporting your views because you're here on the screen with us. So don't knock it. You don't get this anywhere else. Now, Boris is sorry. And the only people to blame for all these deaths is us if we'd stuck by his rules and stayed at home. And also, if we hadn't gone skiing in February, we hadn't gone to Spain in the summer holidays, and we hadn't eaten out to help out the virus, lots of things could have been done differently. It's partly people following rules, but all the surveys actually, Sam, do show that the compliance with the rules has been really good all the way through. The government has said it's people's fault for not obeying the rules, but a tiny numbers doing that, and they're not the ones doing most of the spreading, I'm afraid. Facts don't bear you out there. Now, Halina, let's try and move on to something good, right? We want to end this with some good news, and we try and feel positive about things. So, we're going. Here is some good news, everybody. We put a lot into that. And here we have a story about some jackpot winners, lottery winners, Bill and Kath Malarkey from Coventry. Now, they scooped £1 million on the Euro Millions 3 years ago. And they've gone out and they've spent their money. Firstly, they fed some lorry drivers waiting in the queue for Brexit. And now they've been cooking up Caribbean curries to feed to hundreds of homeless people in their home city of Coventry during lockdown. Now, Halina, they've won the jackpot. They've had the dream. They've got £1 million, which would make most people completely sit back on their bums and go, right, fine, I don't do anything else now. That's it. I'm sorted. And they're actually spending it helping out some other people. Is this not heartwarming and wonderful compared to what we've just been discussing?
Oh, I love this story. And this shows, like, you know, the British people, this is what we're so good at, you know. I think this is at the root of how great this country is. These people, they've won all this money and they just want to do something good. They want to go out and support their community. And, you know, they've obviously won a lot of money. But I know people as well who do things like this. Like my friend Stella, she loves baking food and just going and handing it out to people. And she does that a lot, you know. And I know other people who have done that. And I think that is so lovely to be doing that. And especially to be using all this money that they found. And it looks quite delicious, to be honest. Sometimes these pictures of the food can look a bit disgusting, but I would eat that. I think it looks lovely.
Yeah, it's all vegetarian. Even the cutlery was vegetarian. So they've provided some of the ingredients and some of the delivery sort of process and everything else. And they've worked with a chef at Warwick University to actually prepare the meals in a COVID-friendly way, and are handing it out to the homeless. Nice hot food. And this is, of course, when the government was helping the homeless in the first lockdown, was housing them in hotels, which was doing an awful lot to get them off the street permanently and get them into healthcare and homes and everything else. And now they're not doing that anymore, which is suboptimal, isn't it? And Dexter says, can please someone bring up the fact, you have, Dexter, whatever it is, that parents who work from home are essentially having to choose between educating their children or providing for their family. Why is there no clarity for homeschooling for working parents? Yes, that's the fact that I've seen reported a lot in a lot of places, Dexter. But everybody who is working from home during the pandemic, perhaps in better jobs than those who are struggling that we've been talking about, but they still don't have 3 or 4 hours a day to educate a child. And some of them have got 2 or 3 or more children. You would never get any time to do any work, Halina, would you? It's really unbelievable that this seems to be a reasonable way to go forward.
And I think also parents who, I mean, I'm not a parent, but my sister is, and you know, there have been times where she's had time off work to help her kids and to homeschool them. But even when she has that time, it's so difficult. And you've got some children who have greater needs than others, and there are some also that have a lot of energy. And going to school, you know, she says it completely transforms them. They just come back different people. They're calmer, they're happier. You know, what teachers do is incredible. The skills that they have to raise like the children of this country is brilliant, and I don't think we can really underestimate that.
No. And especially You've got parents who have more than one child, different ages, different levels of attainment, different educational needs, and they've both got socialisation needs as well. They need to go out and play with their friends and stuff, and they can't get that from their mums or dads who are stepping up. And I know parents who are really tearing their hair out. I can't pronounce your name, I'm afraid, Martita. I presume that Martita is your first name and the other one is your surname. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Just blame it all on the government, lol. But the biggest grow on deaths is after New Year's Eve and Christmas, and we was told to stay home. People are more responsible than the government. You are wrong. You allowed that opinion, Martita, but the surveys and the scientific evidence says it's the other way around. And the biggest growth of deaths has been in the last, you're right, in the last couple of months. A lot of it, the ones we're seeing now, were seeded around the Christmas period. The government did tell people to stay home, but they did it so late that most people had either already left to go for Christmas or were so determined to do it because they've been looking forward to it, they went anyway. We all remember those pictures of crowded train stations in London, Halina, don't we? When people were going, right, that's it, I'm going home, this is going to be a lockdown.
Yeah.
People have been well behaved. The government has been very confused in its messaging, and that means that people think it's kind of, I'll make my own mind up as I go.
They brought out so many rules, didn't they? And they changed them. Like at Christmas, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I've moved to Hastings. I actually moved house during that time, and I didn't know what the rules were. And they changed so quickly. I think one day it was one, then it changed to another, and then it changed to another. And it is confusing for people. And you know, we're people that use the internet. We're quite, you know, we're able to access these things. But what about people who don't watch the TV? They don't have the internet. How do they know what the hell is going on? Yeah,
or go to see one set of rules when they're issued and think, well, that's the rule. And then something else is issued a bit later and they haven't caught up with it. And Siobhan says, can we discuss separated parents? Are they still allowed to take their children? I presume you mean from one parent to the other, Siobhan. None of this was ever made clear. It was a bit confusing, but during the first lockdown, they did say that children of separated or divorced parents can switch from one household to the next, which is, again, one of those things where the bubbling isn't quite clear because each parental household is also a separate household. If you are a single parent in that household, you can bubble with another household if you are one parent on your own, as I am. But if you have two new partners, then you are two separate households that aren't supposed to blend, but your children can cross over. Michael says, what tips for parents homeschooling kids during COVID-19? Oh, God. I've no idea, Michael. I can't tell you any. Lock them in the cupboard under the stairs isn't allowed. Maybe you should take them to Downing Street and dump them in a cardboard box and see what Boris Johnson would suggest. I'm a key worker as a journalist, so we get to have our children into schools, and I'm a single parent, so I really need to do that. So that's where mine is today. Otherwise, she'd be photobombing the back of our Facebook Live and expressing.
I love it when she does that.
Yeah, about telling us her opinion about homeschooling of children, which would mainly be CBeebies, I expect today. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Sorry some of you were all a bit grumpy, but it is a bit of a cruddy Wednesday, isn't it? We'll try and do better next week. We'll all put our happy faces on and be back on Monday. We're going to try and do a special school edition of Facebook Live as well, where we'll answer some of your questions about perhaps some tips and what you can and can't do. So keep tuned for that one next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me, Halina, and have a nice end of the week, everybody. See you soon.